Kia ora and welcome back to the Stag Raw podcast. This is episode 285. Thank you so much to all you that left a rating. After the last episode, we are at 48 on Spotify, so we're just that 2 away from the magical 50. But of course, that's just the first minor goal. We want to reach thousands, hundreds of thousands. So if we even got all the Spotify followers to get started, it'd have us on our way to that goal of 1,000. So thank you so much, because what it does is it helps us to get the episodes out to more people, so more people can learn about living their life less ordinary, get those little examples of people following their passions, doing the things that fill them up, and of course hearing about the rickety up and down road that it takes to get to following your dreams. Speaking of following your dreams, and a shared dream I have actually, Will Fleming has started Campfire Studios. Awesome stuff there for Will. I'm super excited. I will have recorded an episode at Campfire Studios before this goes out, so look out for that one. And if you or someone you know is looking for some audiovisual content, hit up Campfire Studios, or you're wanting to start a podcast. This year, it appears to be the year of the podcast, but like so many, they go out on their own. Some even go and buy the Rodecaster and all the mics and everything, and get about 3 episodes in, and then that's them done. So with all of that taken care of, Campfire Studios take out the grunt work, and you can get on with having the enjoyable, awesome part of having the conversation. Of course, for me and for Will, the technical side of things, the background side of things is also enjoyable and exciting, and I think that speaks to both of our longevity. I think you could call Will almost the Adam Curry of podcasting in New Zealand, the podcaster, or the podfather for New Zealand. He has been around for over 10 years. He's before that worked in television. So yeah, you're in excellent hands when it comes to Will. So I hope you really, really enjoy this podcast. Make sure you go over to Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever and actually have a good look at Campfire Studios and what it offers. There are a number of podcasts out there that are actually recorded in Campfire Studios. There's a couple of, I think, Hendo's Hot Topics out of there. The Wolf of Queen Street comes out of Campfire Studios. And of course, one of my episodes shortly is going to be out of there. So yeah, keep an eye out for that studio. It's really, really exciting. And also just check out the amazing stuff that Will's doing, and especially his new podcast, A Beacon of Hope, which I'm a guest on. I talk about my beautiful daughter that's just sitting over here watching me, finding this very interesting. And Di Henwood is on there. Dr. Paul Wood, who of course we've had on this podcast a few times. Yeah, some really, really interesting stuff on there. They start out sort of half an hour stuff, but I see that Will, with the introduction of podcasts on YouTube, has added that out to an hour and a bit more video content. Of course, the podcast is brought to you by Kane's Deer Velvet. If you or your loved one have some aches and pains setting in, or an injury that needs support to heal, consider topping up your body with Kane's Deer Velvet. It's packed full of amazing nutrients that the body uses in maintaining immune system, bones, joints, circulation, and general well-being. Find out more at www.canesdeervelvet.com and use the code STAGRAW252 to get yourself a 25% introductory discount. DrinkElement.com/StagRaw is where you can get yourself a free sample of the amazing Drink Element. Just pay for the shipping from the States. If you're doing an order over $100 US, you will get free international shipping, and I think you lucky buggers in the States get free shipping. I took the Drink Element with me on my recent hunt into the Kaimanawas. Jeepers, that was an amazing resource to have. I spilled a bit of gravy on those hikes up and over mountains, but Drink Element kept me hydrated. And of course, the Brain Drink, invested by none other than Stephen Adams. Arepa, the world's smartest brain food, 100% natural, caffeine-free, effects you can feel. Stag Raw will get you 20% off when you order from their website, which has a link in the show notes. Go and check them out. Leave a rating as well. Let's keep pushing forward with those ratings and reviews. Make sure you're subscribed. And let's get into episode 285 with Will Fleming from Campfire Studio. Beautiful. Kia ora, Will Fleming.
How are you, Ryan? I'm very good. All the better for seeing you, my friend. My other 1%er.
No, Chris Desmond's back on the horse, isn't he?
Yes, but he is. Well, I think he's been flirting with his own company.
Yeah.
And also just trying to be, a little bit more regular on LinkedIn with the social media content. But yeah, absolutely. I think you'll never stop us from doing some form of podcasting. It's just been too much fun. It's probably been therapy for us in some ways, hasn't it?
Mate, I made a knife the other week. I am going to be trialing a pack on my hunt next week. I'm going to come up and see your beautiful studio in 2 weeks. Mate, what? Let's go there. Awesome thing to must open the door each time and go, fuck, this is real.
I'll tell you what's real is my internet in Waiuku, which just dropped a little bit out as you were saying something. Just repeat that for me.
I was saying, what's it like to open the door and go, fuck, this is real?
Do you mean just in general, or were you talking about the podcast studio?
The studio itself.
Oh, well, bro, it's surreal. And I was planning my week this week, and I have a ridiculous amount of control over that, and I never anticipated that would be one of the benefits to attempting to run your own gig. When you try something for yourself, you don't only have your history of baggage, you have statistics. You have statistics like 1 in 3 small businesses will fail. You'll have everyone telling you the reasons why not to. And the funny thing about it, and I was thinking about this before we came on, I don't want to really take us off too many tangents, but I've found it like an exercise in faith. And not that I'm any good at exercising religious faith, but to believe that something will be there if you try, to believe that there will be an answering of whether that be commercially or your friends finding leads for you, or just yourself enjoying the freedoms, I guess, that comes along with the stresses. So to answer your question in a very long way, that door represents more than just a studio, a podcast studio. That represents, this human journey that I'm on, trying to reconcile this idea of, what's worth it, and it's those little things, bro. Being able to say to myself tomorrow that I've got time to drop the kid off at kindy and go with my wife for a walk, and then I've got an appointment at 12, and that's on my terms. And so if you talk to me in a year, I might be like, bro, it's not worth it, but I suspect that it will be, because as one of, have you had Alia Buzhalova, Dr. Alia, on your podcast?
Not on my podcast. There was a period of time where I did try to organize things, and I don't know what happened in her life, but we lost contact. But I have heard her story and heard her talk. When I moved back from Australia, I went and worked for a physique practice, and now the Independent Optometry Group, and I got to go to their sort of AGM in Queenstown, and she was the guest speaker, and it was, I think, half an hour, 45 minutes. We had all sort of had some drinks and nibbles and conversation, and I think we had dinner already, and then Alia spoke, and mate, everyone couldn't get their jaws off the table. They were just like, holy shit.
That's right.
This is when things get real.
Yeah. So would very much encourage you and support you, and still trying to pursue her as a guest.
Oh, yeah.
Because an amazing person, and how it relates to why I brought her up is I recently had her as a guest on my podcast, and I was asking her about hope, but from a first person lens. I'm hoping that I'm trialing this stuff and that there'll be something at the end of this tunnel, if that makes sense. Or, and I guess in brass tacks, I'm hoping I'll be able to make enough sales or learn how to do that, and that there will be a need for the service that I provide in terms of podcasting and video creation for clients. And she said, well, look, how hope works is it's enough to get you to that next step. And of course, when you're at the next step, you'll survey your options. And because that is how life works. What she said is horrible is something that she categorizes as toxic hope, which is you hope your current situation will get better. And that kind of hit me like a train, because you got the stress over on this side, which is, let's just say, all of us wanting to pursue our dream and all of the baggage that I referred to. And then you've got the other version of us over here, which is probably where most people sit, right? And it's a good place to sit because it's somewhat security driven. No one likes the idea of not being able to feed their kids or even go without themselves. But I thought that toxic hope was something many of us can maybe relate to. The idea of hoping that things in your world will get better, things that you might not like or that you don't understand or that happen to you. And she actually said that's not hope, that's wishing. And you shouldn't wish. So yeah, bro, you mentioned, the studio door and opening that up, and I would say it's a beautiful thing. And also, I guess I should say too that I've been searching, as you know, through our relationship for years about, I guess, what makes us us and makes us fulfilled and happy. And one thing I've realized is like there's awesome luck in life sometimes if you can, I guess, take that first step. And actually where the studio is my business partner. His name's Guy Pigden, and he's a film producer, and he's a friend that we built a slow relationship with over the years and never knew that our paths would cross this way. But he happens to have a passion for making people look beautiful on a wide lens, or like what you see on your screen. And that's why he's a filmmaker. And I happen to have a passion for like just talking with people. And whether I call that sales or podcasting or Tuesday, I don't care. I just love connecting. And so what we've been able to do is bring our, I guess, skills together. And that's life's gift, right? Luck. That's if you're willing to, I guess, pop your head up and see what's happening at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. I've listened to a few of them. Yeah, and it was interesting when you had me on and you were talking about the concept of hope. I sort of toyed with the idea that I'm not that hopeful, but I am. But I'm very quick to turn my hope to action, and I think that was what I reverberated back and forth with Alia's point. And then it was the same when you had Paul Wood on lately, and again Di Hemwood, the conversation you had with him. There was a lot of that sort of action, and Di's was quite good in that he with cancer originally went to fight it. That was his initial reaction, and then to sit with it and be with it and take it with him, because what he say, it's part of me, and so I've got to work with it. I was like, that's quite
right.
nice. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the bits of critique I give myself, and maybe well, I don't even have the right word, and I don't want to be disrespectful to many of us, but we're part-time wellness warriors. We're interested in the education around lots of things that are supposed to enhance you, biohacks or systems, But one thing I thought with Di, who's going through stage 4 cancer, is all of those tools are great till the wheels come off. And then you're left with what are the true things that you adopt. And he's talked to me in the past about mindfulness, Buddhist meditation, I guess cold therapy, fasting, all of the things that are real buzzwords, but that dude is enacting them now. And the biggest one that really kind of blew my socks off was like, and it doesn't make sense when you say it out loud because we're not culturally encouraged to talk this way, but he even sends his love to cancer, you know, because he's like, maybe that thing feeds off not just, you know, sugars and fats in your body and to grow, but maybe it feeds off the, you know, the hate or the anger you give it. And so like you put yourself in those shoes and you're like, well, I think most of us would say we're quite, you know, open and resilient and willing to give things a go. Really? You're going to love your cancer when you get it? So but you know, when you talk to someone and let's just see, yeah. No, that was a really interesting episode for me. I mean, obviously that podcast we're talking about is a beacon of hope. That's my new I guess evolution of where I'm at as a podcaster, that I've been open to a lot. You know, my first attempt was, please blow my mind. That was the question to people. Can you just let me in on what makes you you and what you find interesting? And although I don't think it was a huge success because of its numbers, I definitely think it was a podcast of love for me. You know, I ran for 163 episodes and again made some amazing friends. But I always had that question, you know, what are you searching for, Will? What are you searching for? And I guess when it came down to it, and I took a break from podcasting and I started the Campfire Studios business, I obviously got that itch back. But the itch gets scratched. I've tested this, you know, 50 times or so, where if I sit in the production chair just to produce a podcast, I still get the buzz. And I was so thankful that it wasn't all ego for me, that I don't need to just be the dude on camera, you know, or on mic, that I actually got a buzz just being in the room when, as you know, 20 minutes in, you've reached that point where you're like, gosh, what is that? What is that connection? You know, and I would suspect that's what we're addicted to. That's what I think our audiences may hope for every time a conversation begins, especially if they're not so familiar with us. But yeah, bro, it's kind of, it continues to be a wild journey, and I never thought. I mean, I guess I hoped it would be my job one day, but maybe I put it under the archetype of, you know, Joe Rogan, do it for a long time for nothing, and maybe something will come your way. And, you know, I think one thing we don't think about him is, well, just the amount of talent and contacts and resource and also timing, you know. And I hope to maybe, if you're not going to follow exactly his system, but maybe just look at what made it interesting, he did something he enjoyed for a long time and just happened to come of age, you know. And so I guess that was the question for me, what's that for us, you know? And I guess my big hope and fingers crossed is that I'll work really hard to provide awesome podcasts and video and audio for people who have the resource and are busy, you know, that they can pop into the Campfire Studio and I'll push record and they're on, you know, and they look fabulous. And by no means is that anything on what we do, because, you know, we're just podcasters who, we don't mind being in person, we don't mind doing it online, we don't even mind if the gear breaks down and we've got to start again. That's how much we love it, you know. and that's me and you doing a podcast one time. My gear broke down, and then we went another 2 hours.
Yeah, I've had that of late. I've resorted, thankfully, the my partner has a very good iPad that can do 1080 and 6 FPS, and it's like quite good. Like, oh, that's going to serve a purpose for a while, because as you well know, these things aren't cheap. But yeah, well, I remember in that conversation you were talking about that you were at that sort of precipice of like, what do I do with Please Blow My Mind? And of course you had this idea of studios in your head and you were waiting to execute. What was it like putting Please Blow My Mind to bed?
I guess what I'd say, bro, is like the last year. So we're recording this on Sunday the 16th. On Wednesday the 18th, that's 1 year since my mother passed. And so for the last year, I've been, I guess, just processing what that all means, you know. And in some ways, this podcast, my current evolution, you know, a beacon of hope, It is a love letter to my mum because she, just by kind of, being a good mum, filled me with hope, which sometimes is confronting and in a way that when you look at the world, it can sometimes seem a bit too fearful and kind of tyranny based, if you know what I mean, where power is everything. And actually you sit there and think, well, where the hell does things like love and hope fit? And of course, I think the answer might be, for me anyway, that it's in things like healing and trust and, hoping the best for others and those type of things. So I guess I was just ready to make a couple of little pivots, like I think because mostly I interview people and maybe some of me comes through, but there's lots of me that doesn't come through when I'm interviewing people because it's about them, and I really love that. But one thing I have a insecurity about is I sometimes feel like I wasn't prepared for a world that's like the world we're going into. Quite a tough world, dog eat dog. The people like Trump get to the top because they're really that's just their dream, is to control,
to be on top.
And that's right. And I guess I thought, well, maybe one way to actually not be powerful, but to kind of not be so scared of the world, is to start doing a few more brave things for yourself, and so that's maybe where like things like starting to ponder what would it be like me running my own thing, and that's probably been a 10-year, maybe longer exercise, but yeah, just maybe spurred on by this moment in my life where my mum passed. I'm the youngest of all the kids in our family, so I'm the spoiled brat. I'm also this weird mixture of someone, if you meet me in real life, I'm quite tall. I'm 6'4", and most people are quite like taken back because if they see me online, it's not obvious how big you are, like tall wise. And so I have this weird thing with people where I'm big like a bear, but I'm gentle like a whatever, and there's this weird element to me. But so I've been trying to process all this stuff, and it's a really long way again of just saying like, I'm not sure what everything's about in life, but I'm quite certain that it's about taking action. It's about making decisions, and it's about trying, I believe, not to have too many regrets. And so a regret I think I would have. I'm 42 now. I think I was 52. And I was still, kind of making videos for people, for others, and still just doing my thing. I think I'd be a bit disappointed with myself that I didn't actually, seize the moment, look at, I guess, taking a bit more control into my own life. The other weird thing that has happened to me over the last 1 or 2 years is I got a mentor. And I've been kind of, I guess, resistant to having a mentor, because I don't like listening to people. I don't mind listening. Yeah, exactly. I particularly don't like listening to people who I get the feeling aren't better at what they do than I am. And I know that's it's quite a naive view of the world, but I started to have problems with managers where they would try and tell me things, and I think they were just doing it because they were my manager. And I think I wanted to relate to people on a deeper level to say, I thought we were actually talking above standard KPIs, where you actually know my skills because people have told you, and I've actually saved your bacon and you've saved mine, and that's actually what we're here to fight for. But when it came down to it, the process, the system, the KPI, the contract was kind of pushed back at me. And it kind of
I've had that twice. In the last year, man.
Yeah. And look,
that's where I am.
It breaks your heart. There's no other way.
That's where you get frustrated. You're like, I thought we were, even like words like colleagues, humanity, trying to work towards the same goal, but you're going to you're going to push me down and shut me down just because you're senior.
Yeah, and I don't know what that is. I've been trying to, because actually, everyone will have a different story, and I think it leaves pain, it leaves trauma, it leaves your heart broken, especially if you're someone who really kind of believes in big missions. And when people say they have values, like, I want to be in on that. I love nothing more than, and then especially when people say to you, oh, look, man, we got your well-being in mind. I'm like, that's all I've ever wanted as a mummy's boy, just that I will give you that trust, and I expect the highest level that, that if something was really wrong, you could sit down and have a heart-to-heart. And I guess I just started having some experiences which weren't all other people's fault. Maybe some of it was mine, but it was suggesting to me that, the more you kind of, I guess, try and break the shackles, maybe that's when others realize that, and they're not so sure because they've, maybe they got their own issues with that and they haven't broken it for themselves. So it's like, well, this dude's not getting one up on us, So that, I guess as a conglomerate, and the other thing too, like being 42,
meaning
throughout
of the universe, isn't it?
Is it?
Something like that. 42, 43.
Awesome. Oh well, 43. I'm coming
from the Hitchhiker's Guide. I haven't watched it, so I couldn't tell you the answer. Just like the meaning of life is 42, isn't it?
Okay. Oh well, it's certainly my meaning of life. It's and I know what it is. I know the answer. The answer is that you can see, you can plot out things, because you're, with a bit of luck, at least halfway through this thing. Yeah. And so you're thinking to yourself, it becomes really obvious, because things like realizing how fast that went, and so, bro, look, I just think it's really interesting. I've been trying to categorize exactly what I'm up to, and it's really hard to put it into words, because some of you feels like a bit of a schemer. You're trying to make yourself believe so you can do it, and the other half is like, no, I got 20 years experience doing this stuff now, and it's a bit different to a teenage version of an entrepreneurial you. You actually do have some things to peddle, if you know what I mean. If you can go for it and be a bit lucky, and others will champion you, and you can do a good job. So, I put it down to kind of 3 questions that I've been developing for myself, and when people ask, I'll tell them. And you didn't ask, but I'll tell you anyway. So the question I ask myself all the time, or probably not all the time, but enough, is, what can I do that others find hard but I find easy? So for me, that's a logical way of saying maybe that's what you were put here to do, or maybe a gift, or something that your brain just gets, something that you can go into flow with, and it's not hard, but others would be like, dude, I could never do that, So that's the first question. Then the second one, to kind of push on the first question, is, will people pay money for that? And that's the hard one. That's the one you got to be kind of honest to yourself. And I think there is a way, if you can use that question to kind of mold the first one around. So I was trying to get away from like, well, I really love eating. Will people pay money for that? Probably, but you'll have to be the world's best eater, And are you prepared to try and be the world's best eater? In the podcasting realm, I love podcasting. Will people pay money for that? Probably not in my current format, because I'd need to be 1 or 2 on the top 10 of podcasters, and actually that's results driven. You need to have a large audience, and that probably won't happen for me. So I used it to kind of tweak the thing. Well, what is it about podcasting that I like, and all those things, and that became a little bit of an idea that became my business, and then of course luck of coming up, mentioning my business colleague, and then actually finding that people would put money towards it. That's the hard bit, and that's the fear, right? That you start all this thing and you got the website and actually can't make sales. I think I had a third question, but probably two is enough. Those are the ones that I bounce back and forward when I'm thinking about this stuff. So I try and make it quite logical for me. And I know by now after doing, and you should be the same, whether it be in your optometry field or in your podcasting career, that you definitely tick off those boxes of, what can I do that, others find hard, but I find easy. And then just using that second question to help guide you, But I guess what I'd say too, bro, is like time's ticking.
Yeah.
And I think it's true when you hear the elderly say, like, I wish I had given it a go.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that on Friday. Popped into my old work and caught up with my boss, and he did a reference for me, and we were just talking about, what the next sort of 2 years potentially going to look like. And caught up with the other boss's wife and sort of gave her the surface story of what's happened in the last couple of months, and she flat out said to her, "How old are you, Ryan?" I was like, "Oh, chill out." I was like, I said to her, there is a reason. I said there is a reason, but unfortunately, she was with somebody, and like it's, I'm talking about at surface level here on a podcast, and unfortunately, I probably can't dive deeper publicly, but yeah, it's like it's similar to that situation you're talking about of being, diving into something in good faith with passion, trying to see the same values and the same idea and towards the same goal, and to get quashed on a couple of things and get absolutely crushed on it, you go, fuck, this that's what I spoke about when I was talking to you. This is the long road. I was trying to figure out what to do next, and I've made a move. I'm going to be working at Specsavers, which again takes a little bit of mental gymnastics, but I have a bigger purpose there that makes that a good move and the right move. And I've had support from people in the industry that have said, sounds like a good move. Because, like I said in that podcast, there's a couple of things I've got to sort out from my past that need tidied up and mean that I can go forward with confidence and do that. So, yeah, with like the timing of it all, and then also intriguingly from me outside looking in, the people that you've connected with in terms of Pasifika and is it specific? Let's get specific.
Yeah, let's get Pacific. It's one of Will's
that's the one.
Crack up made up names that I got funding for a podcast. Yeah.
So you obviously knew that your time was coming to an end with your mum, and you got some recordings done, and you sort of I purposely said to you at the start, kia ora there, Will, this connection and loss of story to you of your heritage, and then to see the connection you've made in bringing the business forward has been a fascinating thing. Like, wow, what a cool thing. And it's interesting, like you say, you're the youngest, but you're the mama's boy. You've also kind of like picked up what the fuck is our story?
Yeah. Well, my mum, just a bit quickly on her family story, she's the youngest of her family, and her dad came to New Zealand from Raro to build the Harbour Bridge, right? That was his story. He got a job to come and do that. So the way it worked is he saved up, and they had 5 kids, and it took them 10 years to get them over by boat. So they had work, one would come over, work, one would come over. And so there's all sorts of kind of difficulties with just getting your head around that, especially in our work now, which, it definitely doesn't span over years. It spans over days or weeks, and just trying to get your head around how all that stuff worked. But I guess my mum did some really awesome things, but in some ways they had some negative unintended consequences. One of them was she thought she was doing the right thing by raising me just like a Kiwi of the 80s.
Mm.
And I guess, you start to see like a pushback on that these days, and in terms of more cultural inclusion.
Mm.
But I grew up not knowing jack shit about my past, and where I come from and her family. Now, that's not entirely true, because we have a big Cook Island family and we would always visit, but I was always like the kind of, I guess the white cousin, who came from the farm and hung out with everyone. And so it was good though, like it's not like I didn't have a ball growing up, and still extremely close with all my family. But I don't know how to speak Cook Island. I don't know how to introduce myself. And like I said, 42 is the magic number, bro, because I thought to myself, if I'm halfway through, I've only really searched one part of my existence, and I've got two, So the other part is the European side, which I have absolutely leveraged. I've gone to, European schools. I've grown up, having a reasonable command over English, and being able to network, and, grew up in those kind of rugby environments, and you know what I mean? Like all of the privileges that everyone is saying is there are absolutely there if you are part of these groups which network through opportunity and golf clubs and that type of stuff. I went to Auckland. I went to Auckland Grammar, and
Yeah.
it was like that. They breed you to be the next generation of leaders, And I guess in saying that, but again, I guess the power struggle for me has been, I don't wish to be a CEO of a big company. I don't wish to try and control big amounts of money. That isn't. So the Cook Island part of me, I think, has always just been dormant, which is more of those values around things that break your heart, bro. Trust, community, service, the belief in higher things, Um, and so, yeah, man, like I'm definitely aggressively, I've used that term in a funding meeting I had the other day. I'm aggressively trying to reconnect with my Pacific side. And the way I'm doing that is by saying all of these tools that I learned over 20 years, whether it be my time working in TV or learning how to edit to a really high level, I'm going to use that now. That's going to be my business. I'm going to try and use those skills as the world is asking for more Indigenous voice. I will help contribute positively to that market, And so we've had some mild success by being in a good timing for conversations, where people are looking for more ways to have amplification online, for example. And I guess, bro, like I'm at a good age where people actually are interested in listening to somebody who's in their 40s, as opposed to me being in my 20s where you just sound like a runt, if you know what I mean.
And
You know
like what would you know types sort of
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah. So like life has that kind of stuff planned for you, and I know there's a sweet spot. That's my instinct anyway. Is that I better be established by my 50s, because I don't want to have to be chasing this as hard. I want to be thinking about what 50-year-olds think about if they've, had or been allowed to, or they've fought for their own decision making, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, man, it's a really interesting moment in my life, and our time in history, and where our country is, and I feel for you, man. I feel for you, because I mean, obviously we're speaking publicly, but I've heard a bit of your story on my podcast. I said to you offline the other day, my wife listened to it, and the feedback she said? She said, I wish I knew more.
Hmm.
I wish I could ask Ryan all these things. And I think that's one of the things we have to grapple with, is we go right to the edge, but then we leave the details, and it's good and bad. It protects us, but also it's like, it's hard, eh? We invite people along for the journey, and then we say, well, you're at the door now, and sorry, you can't come in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is she loved the podcast, and but she was like, oh, there's too many things to imagine. What are the variables here? And I guess I'd just say to you, like, obviously I know things are weighing heavy on your heart, but I think, and it might just be because I'm in the honeymoon period of trying to start this, and we've had some mild success with a few funding applications. But when you make an aggressive attempt to have a bit more control over the variables, there's other things that meet you halfway.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that, like, higher at the door, I think what we've both spoken about, the humanity of things, is that, and even you were saying about when it comes to those interactions, we both have that empathy to understand that it is in a relationship situation. There are two people present when there are disagreements, or when, us personally or somebody else feels vulnerable, and there's always two sides. And I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to other people in life that you don't know what's going on in their life. They will have their set of reasons why they feel the way they feel, and a bit like us, letting on a little bit that something haven't gone to plan, but both have big gratitude that we have great lives, and I'm lucky that we have great lives. The two are dealing with their story and their journey and their outcomes. And when things don't align, I think you do have to be okay to go, I'm not going to be able to open the door on their whole bag of shit, and probably don't want to either, because I'm not the person to sort their life out or their bag of stuff. I've got to sort my own bag of things out. And so that's a sort of humility and empathy that you can have when a situation ends, not necessarily badly, but with a disagreement that you sort of can't solve. Yeah,
that's right. And it's just tricky, Yeah, it is tricky. It's tricky to make sense, because I don't think there's too many really evil people, right?
Yeah.
But there's definitely, you can get yourself into a position where you're like, you can start feeling like hatred, you know what I mean? And maybe it's not entirely fair, because you're also frustrated that you get limited control over things, or, so I don't know, man. Like, I just don't think everything needs to be confronted. I think that I'll go or we'll just go to a different area, and we'll try and make the wind stack up in this space. And when it enters my mind and I'll get really pissed off, I'll just, I'll try and send a bit of love, or at least, if you're not willing to do that, I'll say that question. Imagine if you could, offer a bit of gratitude that way. And this is not really applicable to much, but it's something going on in my world. I brought my first home, and of course, everyone who's owned a home will say to you, your first home is not your perfect home, But I've got a few neighbours who are a bit rowdy, and I think that there's a bit of substance abuse, which, as somebody who thrives best when I can understand the circumstances I'm in, I'm really not good if you put me in a situation where it's really unpredictable. So that's why kind of drugs freak me out. Makes people unpredictable, and also at unpredictable times. But let's just say, for conversation's sake, that there's been a few instances, right? So I find myself really on edge about that, but I also sit back and try and do the exercise of, man, at least hope for the best for that person. Maybe they're just around the corner of getting some support, even if I'm not brave enough to go and offer it, right? Which is what the other thing Di Henwood said in his episode, is he's just that dude. He'll go down and see the neighbors and say, hey, can I help out in any way? For me, I'm not currently brave enough to do things like that. I don't know why. But it's like, the world is intense, and there's many lenses we can look through, and I guess for me, I'm just trying to look through one where I control my own variables, but where I'm aware that other variables are out there, and where possible, maybe just try and think, maybe hope for the best for them.
Yeah. You're picking up on what you were saying about the stories and how like there's a need in this world for acknowledging the stories. Like me growing up in Invercargill, it's unreal to meet someone like Stefan Smith and Gareth Jones and hear about Bluff Marae, and like I knew it was there, I knew it was going on, but just someone would tell me. I went to a primary school that luckily enough had its marae, but I didn't actually know the context of why a school had a marae. I take it that probably Invercargill being quite Scottish, Protestant type thing. I imagine Brahma I had a connection with either Presbyterian or Anglican faith, whereas my school was Catholic. So I assume that's how Te Tōmarangi Marae got formed. That there was a portion of Southland of Invercargill who were Catholic, and that was the marae they wanted to set up. So yeah, these are all assumptions. But my stepdaughter is Kahangungu and Kaitahu, and her uncle has just started a page, Bo Waka, and he's going around on Instagram, beautiful, like a bit like your studio at Campfire, got the good mics as well, just telling the real simple stories of what to do on marae, and just like, that is awesome. So, I'm Irish and a little bit of Scottish and Welsh and English, but mostly Irish. But I think that's really awesome, especially her being my stepdaughter. It's like, what is your marae and what is your iwi, and what are the customs and stories of that. So it's the beauty of social media is that we can create these stories. How have you sort of found the people that are coming as storytellers and their excitement to share the story?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think I just didn't know I would excel at is actually supporting someone with the confidence to think that they have a story to tell. Because what happens is, like, and this will sound a bit tripe, and I don't mean it to, but I guess there would be some validation if you look at the current climate of politics, that who kind of owns history owns the literature too. Right?
Yes.
And of course there's a massive critique on that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you got a generation of Kiwi kids who can talk to their English ancestry, right? And even historically be proud of that. And I guess one of the things is I'm realizing is that when I speak to a lot of Pacific and Māori people, to talk about really positive things isn't where the climate is at. We're still at the stage of trying to acknowledge the past, get it acknowledged on, I guess, publicly, the things like the dawn raids and stuff, so that it can begin the healing. And it just seems a bit ironic, because we do know, if you put it under different contexts, I guess a psychological one, that to heal from a trauma, it has to be acknowledged. And if you watch Andrew Humer, Professor Huberman stuff, you've actually got to kind of move towards it, And so if you, I guess, look on paper at Māori and Pacific communities, whether that be substance abuse, whether that be racial abuse, definitely there's trauma there. And I'm not here to talk about that trauma, but I can say from a person who works with a lot of communities that there's a confidence needed to be proud of talking about your, let's say, getting past your pepeha, So I think now, like you're talking about your stepdaughter, we're getting proud of that. But what's next? And that's where I'm trying to fill those gaps, I guess. And these aren't things I've strategically thought about, but as I'm thinking and talking to you, they're coming out. And that's a real privilege, bro, to sit with someone and to have an elder talk to a younger person, and for this back and forth to begin. And like I would personally say, how beautiful it is to kind of witness that healing process, through conversations, and that's been wonderful. So we just finished producing a podcast for a friend of mine, and it's not out yet, but it's very exciting, and who knows how it will go. But essentially, he's a Tongan academic, and he's done a podcast series with other Tongan academics. And the kind of cool thing about this is it will sit somewhere online, and it will find its audience. And the way university academia is moving, as he's told me, is that now you can actually reference a podcast. So I like the idea that this will positively contribute to future generations, and that it will be long lasting, and that, people maybe don't take seriously that lots of cultures are oral based cultures, and they, of course, by default, when it's books and presentations and emails that run our day, are at a deficit because that's not what our ancestors in the Pacific did, for example. We were very big on oral based education. So look, again, man, I don't want it to come off any other way than clearly people know that it's an intense world we live in, and I personally just like it that I get to kind of dip into this really progressive space of healing and also value, because, as you know, and your audience knows, and I know, when you wrap the podcast, you think that was awesome, and that is actually what the Pacific, they have a word for conversation. It's two words brought to one, tala noa, right? And that's a bit like Māori, kōrero, but tala noa, as I learned from one of the guests that I had on this upcoming Pacific podcast around suicide prevention. I might butcher it because I'm still learning, but in short, tala is the talk part, but they have this other area, the noa. So tala being talk, noa being space. And so it's providing a space to talk. And I thought that's a really interesting concept, right? Because Kiwis say, oh, we'll just yarn with a mate. But of course, when you really think about it, when we have our deep conversations, it might be around a campsite. It might be around a beer after work. It might be, if in a more severe case, with a psychologist or a counselor. We care deeply about spaces as well in the West, don't we? We just don't kind of think that's a real thing because we're so zeros and ones about things.
Yeah, and that just brings to mind learning Italian, that they, like, again, put the words belonging to, the space belonging to, they add so much more description, whereas Kiwis, we have this like bastardized British English that we just kind of chuck it into yarn, but it's like, where do we go to have a yarn? Is exactly right. And then on the flip side, it always comes to mind, homebrew, we talk a bunch of bullshit, sports scores and weather talk, there's that part of things, and maybe that is yarning. It's small, it's surface levels, it's nothing, but when we get into the deeper stuff, then it is broader, and like that's for me why I love cooking and conversation. This weekend, Nicole and I have been alone together for the first time since January, and driving in a car, we've been having conversations, making meals together, been having conversations. It's really, really cool, and I love that space of preparation of food, sharing of food, relationship to food. That's why I love agriculture, and why I love hunting, and why I love gathering, and why I love topography and geography, like the place that it came from, the story that it had with it. Terroir, the French talk about, the place that it came from. I think when it comes to the English side of things, we ran away from the monarchy, but we kept it as our little like anchor And meanwhile, we bastardized a lot of it. And it's what are we now, like 150 years old? More than that. No, nearly getting closer to 200 years old. We're still the adolescents. We're still in that, like, just early teens. Like, what the fuck is going on with me?
Mm.
As a country, we're like, what? Well, I did this and I did that and I learned that, and someone told me this and someone told me that, and I don't know what anything means.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're
And
100% right.
everything's changing too. Everything's changing too. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, yeah, and it's scary, and it's like it's always been, you know. It's intense, and it's probably a bit tougher than we thought. And I guess you're looking for those anchors, and I would say, like, you know, the one we all grew up with, which is the British anchor. Clearly, it has its limitations. You know, we saw that in previous generations of our men, for example, who wouldn't talk about their feelings because that's not the way it's done. I mean, look at how that plays out in Britain at the highest order in the monarchy. You know, what did I hear Harry say? Not that I'm a huge fan of Harry, but I took a mild interest. It's like, well, effectively something just like never explain, never complain, or something like that. And if you have the resources to absorb that, okay, maybe you'll make it through. But there's no guarantee there, you know. And also it's like you've got this kind of the weird macho bit leftovers from the British stuff, eh? And I think that it's clearly not a strategy to booze yourself up before you start your deep chat, you know. And it can work maybe in wartime as a suppression tactic, but I think we should talk about this more. Like, we can learn things or relearn things from our indigenous cultures about, just like we said, if we said to people, do you know why it's important to have a chat with a counselor? I don't know what most people would say, but if you could put it through the indigenous lens or that Talanoa lens, you might say, you know, it's not about having a chat, mate. It's about having a meaningful chat. And these people's whole careers are to give you a meaningful experience, to sit you down, to provide a space where there's no interruption. They know they're not a family member. There's no baggage there. They know that what they say has client privilege, you know? And I think we spend not enough time talking like that to our mates publicly, you know, to say, this is not being a soft cock, you know. I think what's being a soft cock, I haven't used that word since I was like 20, but what's being a soft cock is just thinking that all of that stuff's bullshit, because it's not.
No,
you
that's
know
a reaction, isn't it? Like, I'm gonna push away.
Yep. I'll drink it away. I'll cheat it away. I'll fight it away. You know, and you know, I think it's having a bit of courage to, and you know, this is actually throughout our whole communities and society, isn't it? That we're grappling with this in real time. You know, I don't want to change anything, and there's parts of me that's even like that, and it's, you know, it's hard not to get frustrated at younger generations because they're different, just like you and I were the younger generations not so many years ago, you know, and people get pissed off at us because we wanted to wear baggy pants or listen to Nirvana or, you know, get too many earrings, whatever it is. So yeah, bro, and of course we live in the most brutal times in some ways because there's this whole social media world. There's a whole nother world we have to live in. And you know, the thing that freaked me the most out about, I think you and I have talked about algorithms before, but the thing I never knew that really freaked me out was an algorithm works best when it can predict, and that makes total sense. But then it works best because it can make the user predictable. And I thought, you know what, that's the worst. I'm sitting here kind of saying I hate unpredictability. But in some ways, that's some of the best moments, right? When you didn't know what was going to happen, and something amazing happened, bro. You know,
Yeah.
have you ever had those yarns with your friends to say, remember that night we had a blast and we didn't even have a plan? And it was way better than the night that we planned everything to the T. And so, isn't that a shame that everything's going to be so predictable that there is no spontaneity? And, you know, I don't know, bro. It's I can see why people get let down. And I think I even talked about it on my podcast with Alia, saying I was talking to a young person who said, time feels so fast. And I said, why is that? And they said, because when the world's dissolving around you, it speeds things up. And I thought that was a really sad moment, you know? It shouldn't feel like that for people. It shouldn't feel like
especially young. It should be so novel. And I think that speaks to the idea that if you're in your phone and the world is predictable, then it's not normal. You said about the thing you didn't plan. So last week I made a knife, and I was chatting with an old lady, and we were talking about he had some spoons there. I said, I really want to do spoon making. I've written down I've wanted to get a hook knife for a long time. He burrowed into his drawers and go, here you go. I said, what wood should you use? He's like, softwood, birch is really good. Fruit trees are really good. I was like, actually, I've got a peach tree and then he's printing. And so had this knife and paring knife and went off, picked up Billy, came back home, and last weekend Easter, Nicole was away. So I kind of put out the saw and cut a couple of limbs off the tree out there. They tidied it up and started whittling away at this piece of beechwood I had. And then, sure enough, Billy rocked up and says, here, Dad, this one here, make me a spoon too. And I was like, oh dear, I'm having hard enough time as it is making my own one, let alone making one. And so over the weekend, I went back and forth, and whittling a spoon for someone that's not that sort of sculpturally minded. I'm very good at comparing and executing, seeing and executing, analyzing, executing. But to like create, and it's ironic with this podcast, to create is not one of my strong points. But slowly over the weekend, made it bigger, made it smaller, started sanding, and we together sat outside in the sun and did this. I also was like, I need to set up my little camping shelter that I can take hunting. And sure enough, that turned into a little bit of a game in Billy's head. And then I was like, right, I'm going to set up my other tent as well. So we had two tents on the yard. So meanwhile, while we're whittling away, we're sort of playing a game that we're camping on the back lawn, and completely unplanned, unreal, best time. Best time we have with a 5-year-old.
Awesome.
And it's just like 2 days worth of unplanned nothingness was wicked.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful memories, you know?
Yeah. And how good is like a 5-year-old's imagination? Like my daughter shot 4 deer that day. In my backyard and took them.
That's awesome.
We had vintage soup. It was great. Yeah. It's also buzzy about like the spaces. Camping at when the new year, start of the year in Waika, when the light goes out, you know, you go inside and you start playing cards. You get away from the sandbars mostly down there in Waika, and you know, you get part of the way through the game, starting playing the game, and you concentrate on the game, and then the odd conversation starts up, and it was again this sort of acknowledgement of trauma and changing of perspective. My uncle and auntie were talking about them trying to organise some Americans that came in a school exchange to go to Marae, and they had struggled with one of the Marae, not so much with the other, and sort of put it to them that like it's tough for the marae to have an outsider come in and say, can you help me? And they've had the experience for the existence of the marae of not being helped and doing it on their own. Why do you want to go and, show these Americans, from our perspective, it's like, why don't you want to show these Americans the culture? It's like, well, our culture's been suppressed. And we had the story of my stepdaughter's grandfather going by a different name because his Māori name, is suppressed. And it's, for example, that's kind of what you talk about. And then all of a sudden, the perspective change of an experience from 10 years ago, oh, maybe that's why. And again, that thing within Southland, probably the whole South Island of Kaito who settled first and back in the 90s, and there doesn't seem to be too much treaty beef going on there. They seem to be doing well, as in we are not necessarily talking about members, but it seems to be going all good. Why don't they want to share their culture?
Yeah, bro. Well, look, it's even from my perspective, I'm half Cook Island. Remember, Cook Islanders were part of the New Zealand government, so they weren't kind of targeted in the Dawn raids, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I recently did on LinkedIn is I added in brackets to my name, my Cook Island name. Mm-hmm. And so Wiremu is the Māori name for William, and Vidi, or Viriamu, Vidi Amu, is the name I grew up with from my grandmother. Right, so my mum's mum, and I remember I thought that was my name growing up, and I've only, and just in the last night actually, I thought, you know what, I will put that as an acknowledgement of a part of me. So I guess what I'm saying, bro, is I've had a great life. I've had limited to no trauma, really big stuff. I guess I present more European, so even the racism thing, to the most part, hasn't been part of my story. And I still have only just put that side of me publicly. So there is it is tricky. It is tricky because whatever way it's not nice to have the feeling that it's only important. Let's just take your example for the marae. It's well, because we don't feel like doing it. Maybe that's okay. If I came to your town and you didn't feel like doing it, there would be no thing. But I guess it's under that guise of, well, it's the Americans asking, can we just do it? And it's no, and that's okay sometimes, I guess. But it's tricky because obviously there's a revenue side to this whole thing now, and
I think that was part of what soured the experience. Was we took the revenue thing, and I was well, the place has got to run, and you're asking them to do something.
Yeah, and of course for that story, there's the opposite that's happened of generosity too, and I guess that's that's the challenge, to know that actually what's worth trying to calibrate for. I think the way it would go down is if everyone has a blast and there's an equal give and take, then there will be a transfer of something. And maybe that is the correct way to think about things. It's a slow burn way. It's not a capitalist way. It's a relationship building way. And that's why, going back to kind of our work scenarios, that's why it hurts so goddamn much, because that's how I think many of us would like to approach it. Let's go long term. Let's try and create these wins together and celebrate the success together. But look, I get it, bro. It's all different. I knew from early on I wasn't going to be a really successful rugby player, because I didn't like winning enough. Some of my favorite times were when you come off a loss and that feeling you have with people of connection. But of course that's beaten out of you at a certain level, isn't it? Because it's you lost and it's about winning. And I actually heard a nice thing the other day, which has helped frame a little bit up for me, which is the goal isn't to win, the goal is to keep playing.
Yeah.
And that's
Is
what
it
I
Simon
thought. What's that?
Is that Simon Sinek?
No, it's a
He's been
guy.
talking about it like
Yeah,
endless games now.
yeah. No, it might be from him, but the guy I heard it from is a guy Alex Hormozy, and he's actually quite big on LinkedIn, and I've been watching a bit of his stuff. But he's really smart cat, and I just really like that. I like the idea that like the goal, well, unless I can build a really successful business and someone buys it, then who knows what's next. But I want to keep playing, and maybe just to bookend that, bro, to play a bit more on your terms. I mentioned earlier in our chat that I finally got a mentor, and I've just remembered why I mentioned that. He said to me in our first meeting, and so uh, this guy's kind of known as being really successful in the business field, inducted into the Business Hall of Fame, and he took a meeting with me, right? And I was like, man, you're like hot property. Why are you catching up with me? He said, oh, I recognized a surge in you. That's his words to me. And I was like, whew, that's a bit Wim Hof, but I'll take that, And so every month I said, will you mentor me? He said, no. And I said, oh, bugger. He said, but I'll teach you. I don't mentor people. I teach people. And, I was like, oh, okay, Mr. Miyagi, type styles.
Wax on, wax off.
That's right. And it's a bit like that. He teaches me about, cause and effect, the whole models for business like that. And he picks up, we're having coffee and he'll pick up the sweetener and he says, what happens if I drop it, Will? And I said, hits the table. And he says, sometimes. And I said, no, all the time. Are you sure? Yes. Even if I hate the sugar or the sweetener? Yes. And he says, that's a cause and effect that is predictable, that exactly what will happen. He says, in your business, you've got to find your cause and your effect. And so I thought about that for weeks, and ultimately it's not the gear. If I talk cause and effect in my business, I know that when I provide a safe space for someone to chat, I know every time that they'll connect and feel $1 million full of endorphins. And so now I'm seeing, Ryan, if I can capitalize on that financially, right? I don't think that's a bad thing to do because I think it covers a lot of ticks and we're here to kind of survive in a monetary based system, right? But it's really interesting to have a mentor. And again, I'd been kind of resistant and maybe not really aggressively pushed that, and then came across a few people who I thought could be potential mentors, but it just didn't gel. But anyway, bro, the thing that he said that kind of changed my direction when I first met him, apart from cause and effect, was he said, Will, what's your why? And I said, I haven't really thought about that. Maybe my family. I really love podcasting. He said, no, that's not your why. He said, you don't have a why by the sounds of it, so you can have mine. And he said, my why is to do what I want, with whom I want, whenever I want, as often as I want, or not. And he said 99% of people can have all of those things apart from the or not part. So your decision making must give you the opportunity to say no. And nothing's in concrete, Ryan, but I will say that is how I've been trying to live my life, by doing what I want, when I want, as often as I want, with whom I want, or not. So there's one caveat there. I have a wife and family, and they can break the rules, because they're the ones who see me at my best and my worst,
Yeah, that's intense. Yeah, I think on the what you're doing and you're sort of trying to justify the monetizing of it. I think when you started off with this conversation about the 1%, and your article on LinkedIn about actually how small that 1% of people is, but actually how little work in podcasting that takes. That shows that it's actually really hard. And like you said, you find it easy. Lots of people want to podcast. Lots of people see value in podcasts. Lots of people don't actually understand the layers of value there are in podcast. Having a broad array of digital content that can be chopped up and spit out and put across all sorts of places and different links, that links to websites, that goes on numbers of platforms, giving links, exclusive links back to websites, back to people, back to platforms, allows you to articulate a message, allows people to engage with somebody in a space. That's the value proposition. Podcasting and what it takes to be the 1% and get over 20 episodes, that's not very many, is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're the gap in the market. You know?
Yeah,
And
well, we all are, but I'm trying to find a way to. I'm trying to ask myself: is there a sustainable system here that can at least keep me going until I really find the edge? You know, like
the edge of the market, yeah.
yeah. Like I think what I would like is, you know, how there's massive firms that do contracts for big companies. You know, maybe anything you see as a television ad, for example, that's had some grunt behind it. I would like to be part of where that type of resource is given to these podcasts. You know, where that and I'll be kind of known as a champion of these conversations and bringing them together, because they should happen, especially in a world which is, I guess, not really understanding the value of human connection. You know, definitely in-person human connection, or at least like what we're doing. And by actually, these tools that we're using for our podcast now weren't built for podcasting. They were built for a weird reason of this kind of lockdown environment where we all had to present ourselves in these virtual spaces, and that was actually not positive. You know, first of all, there was too many of us, and that's not how a real chat works. And then you spend the whole time looking at yourself, making sure you're not frowning too much or picking your nose, you know, and that became a more, that's right, you know, more stressful experience, as opposed to what we're using for, which is at times we can portal together, can't we? And it feels like we're in a real setting together because it's very intimate. So yeah, bro, it's got me fascinated. And the jury's out whether I truly believe that it will work. But I tell you what, I am not keen on. I'm not keen on getting older and having more run-ins with people about trying to prove who's the most tolerant, who's the most trustworthy. I'd rather just go out there and have genuine relationships, and that be the way I earn money. And maybe that's not for everyone, and I didn't think it would be for me. I come from a family of people who work for other people on both sides. I don't know anyone in my family who really runs successful big businesses. So in some ways it'll be a fluke if I can get there. But yeah, regardless, bro, we're gonna have a go at this, and so far so good.
You said that your mentor gave you a why, and you didn't really have a why. When you left the editing suite and the camera behind, did you have a plan, or you just thought, can't keep doing this in this form?
Yeah, it's funny, like, it's funny. It's been a transition over probably 2 years. So what I've been trying to do is I had to walk away initially from the safety, but I kept small contracts, you know, and those contracts became frustrating because you were thinking, I'm still doing everything in my 2 days and I'm trying to get paid for my week and my 3 days. You know, what I want to be doing is over here, but I still have to do this. And then I guess you keep pushing, and you get a little bit more security. And the challenge, the eternal challenge I have is, what's enough buffer?
Mm.
And it's really unreasonable when you're the one in the driver's seat. With a job, if you quit, you got 4 weeks, and you have to find something else if you can't before then. It's done all the time. People do it. But when you run your own business, 4 weeks seems like 2 days, And so I was in the situation where I had worked hard and, let's say, saved up 6 months of wages for me, and still felt like I wouldn't be able to do this. I got to a situation where I had, let's just say, like a year's worth of salary that I could use for
Wow.
me. And because it's fear driven, right? And I'm still doing my other contracts and working yourself into the ground. Luckily, though, I guess what I would say on the positive side is I had started to zoom in to the areas where I wanted to work. And so those began to be the contracts, right? Doing a podcast contract over here, doing one over here, doing some things I wasn't entirely comfortable with, maybe having to do some teaching, but still doing it. And then there was a moment where in the last 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, where I got a call. We'd been building maybe 6 months towards a big piece of funding. When I say a big piece, I mean it's not millions. It's like a couple $100,000 that will support me and my business partner Guy for 2 years. And we've got a challenge that we will, I'm happy to talk about. But and that was enough for me. So I went to all my customers that I'm doing these contracts for, and I said, look, I'll still work for you, but it has to be on my terms in terms of a very limited time. I'm going to be going full time into my business. And, oddly, we just ticked over. So what are we, 16th of April? The 1st of April is the new financial year. So I'm 16 days into working full time for myself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really exciting.
It's wild. Yeah. Yeah, and I have a lot of motivation. And if you'd asked me what would I be doing when I set out on that journey to try and be in this position, I would say I have no idea. I'll probably be making podcasts for people. But what we have the funding for, bro, is to create. So, in high schools, there's unit standards, and that's what the students have to earn. It's a bit different for those around our age because we were on a different setup, which is school.
Got to start that stuff.
Yep. And so what I'm designing over the next 2 years by running courses and also working with a team of really skilled people is to create an oral-based podcast unit standard in which students can earn credits in an oral-based way. So there'll be a research element where the student has to research an elder in their community who they wish to learn from. There will be a technical element. How do you set this stuff up so you can conduct? And then you'll get credits based on your output, which is essentially a podcast, but it's a piece of evidence about you conducting a conversation with someone older than you who you can learn from. And, again, man, there's no guarantees, but I've had some pretty awesome conversations with potential partners in terms of NZQA and other ministries, and everyone's kind of like, well, wish you luck, Will. It's no small feat to do something new, but I kind of feel like kind of looping back around that would be a lovely way for me to contribute to my Pacific ancestry, which is an oral based culture, to say that students who wish to can now earn credits by doing it verbally.
That's really cool. I feel really privileged to observe it, man. Like I hope you're really, really proud of what you've done, and like you said, gone beyond that fear that you had. Despite all the preparation, like there's still that element of fear, that willingness to take the step. And it's cool. You've got the little podcast order to remind. You lost your network. Are you back?
I'm back.
Yeah. What did you hear from me?
Oh, just something like you're real. You hung up on me after you said you're proud.
Ah. Yeah, that's it'll come out in the wash of this podcast. Which
Yeah, that's right.
Is the great thing about end-to-end recording.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, thank you, brother. I mean, I guess try and resist the temptation to say, "Oh, fuck yeah, it's all working for Will." I guess the biggest thing I'm most stoked for is that I think it's really possible for each of us to follow a path that is actually a bit more under our control. It's what I wish for and cross my fingers for desperately for you. You know, that you'll find that courage to know that if you start something, that you're not just going to like sit around. You're not just going to sit around and it might be that you've got to innovate in a few areas.
Yeah.
You know, and you absolutely will, because you do it all the time.
Yep.
You know, we do it all the time, and we do it for others, and we champion others, but there's some serious fear when it comes to ourselves. So, you know, yeah, safety nets probably sometimes hold us back. You know, I guess some of the reasons why it needs to work for me. One, I saw, well, the passing of my mum was a reminder, right? I mentioned that. The other thing too, I'm a sole income earner for our family. So it's not like it, I hope it works. It fucking needs to work, you know? And that gives you motivation to be pushing. So, you know, probably not the right space to do this online, but I'd say to you, man, like, for example, if your partner's working and you know you can scrape by and you got a few bucks in the bank, then you can always go back to work for Specsavers, brother.
That's right. I was going to say the same thing to you, man. Like, if it doesn't work, you can always get a job.
100%. And, you know, we're in a job market, aren't we?
At the moment.
So that's right. That's right. Yeah. And we live in a country where
rumor has it they're trying to lift unemployment.
Yeah. But we're also in that country where you could get wins if you really needed to. So, you know, I guess that's the honest question with yourself: is it worth having a crack? And that's the privilege which I think all of our parents and great grandparents and whatnot worked their asses off for, eh?
Yeah.
You know, so that us could have a go, and who knows, it might all turn to shit. And like you say, we're lumped with a bunch of debt. But I think if you're a human-based business, meaning something that deals with real people, I don't think there's a huge amount of cost associated with that. You know, I mean, I'd be worried if I needed to have 100 staff, but I know that you could pretty much. Well, yeah. Anyway, you know what I mean, man. Have you ever had your what do they call it? Your Myers-Briggs? Have you ever had your? Yeah.
I'm a commander.
Okay. Yeah. So, what's the characteristics? What's the bullet points on that?
You basically want to steer the ship. So I think it's like ENFJ. So it's mostly extroverted. You're quite analytical. You're empathetic, and the last one's judging. So that's that. Influences all the time. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm the champion, they call it, and my kick is off supporting. You know, so that's why I'm deadly serious when I say, like, absolutely, you can do whatever you want, Ryan, and that if you can find the courage to make it more on your terms, I think it will help with the other areas in life too.
Oh yeah. That gets back to your leader why, like, to with you up on your terms or not. How good is that? That was really good.
Well, it was weird. But I guess there's some caveats. I've met up with the mentor, and he said, look, but the difference is, Will, he said, not everyone's made to step out. He used the canoe. He said, not everyone's made to step out of the canoe and hoping that there's land there. It might just be water, and it's okay. We're all different, but I suspect you're maybe tinkering with the idea of doing your own thing, and I think lots of your audience would support you to know that, what do you got, a few hundred every download? At least if you put an ad up on your podcast, at least those few hundred people would go and like it, would share it to their networks, and you hardly ever ask anything of anyone. And so it's like, if you just said in one thing, I need you to share this to your networks because I'm starting, O'Connor optometry, then it's like absolutely everyone would. Yeah.
No, it's true. That is right. I've watched Gary in 2015, and it turns out Crush It came from 2008, which is hard to believe. But the jab, but hook 15, 16, and that's exactly that, isn't it? You put out over 400 pockets of content plus whatever you do on the socials and store and all the rest, to ask once in a blue moon is interesting, and it's cool. So the new podcast and Campfire Studios, I referred it to somebody today actually, so hopefully they come forth to you, because a service that they were talking about was like, well, I just happened to know a guy. He does exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. What have you got going there with Campfire Studios?
Yeah. So Campfire Studios, essentially, it's like a TV studio, basically in a garage. So you would think people don't like going into a garage, but what I've learned is people don't like going into a real TV studio where it makes you freak out. Ultimately, it will look like you're in a TV studio, but you're just in Will's mate's garage. So you're not kind of panicking. But it's got all the bells and whistles. It's got professional cameras. It's got lighting. It's got 4 microphones. It's got a giant TV which you can put your logo up, and a comfortable space where you can feel free to bring your networks in. So when I'm dealing with a business, I'm like, you've absolutely got a giant list of people who could be your guests. You've got your staff, you've got your contacts, you've got your potential contacts, you've got your family members, and you've got anyone else you can dream up, because that's how podcasting works. After 10 years of us doing it, people still respond positively to getting an email to be a guest on a podcast. It's genius. It's a great network builder. And I guess the other part to Campfire Studios is we make professional brand videos as well. So people who are looking to have that really crisp kind of brand video, both Guy and I have got years of experience directing and working with businesses. So we're going to be pushing that this year. It's a great time to get in with us, because we're going to be super cheap, because our main funding is coming from our main wages is coming from the funding, right? So we now can offer at cost and not go backwards, if you know what I mean. But we don't have to be profit driven, at least for the next year. And so it's fabulous. It means we can help our friends to make awesome bits of content, high-end pieces of content that would normally cost thousands. And in this case, it only costs hundreds now. So that's fantastic. And the podcast, A Beacon of Hope, it's the more I think about it, it's a love letter to my mum. When I get people on, I try to do what I've always done, which is to connect deeply, to talk about big topics. And the big topic is hope. Where do you find hope? And maybe that's caged within someone's personal story, like it was with our conversations. And I also try to think about the digital archiving part of these chats, where, yourself, I asked you to say that you love someone out loud, just because we do it all the time. But what's beautiful, and I'm experiencing this with recordings I did of my mum, is I get to hear her talk, and that's going to be worth more value as the years go by. I'm only 1 year into my journey of missing her, but I already have a regret, and the regret was I didn't ask her to say she loved me on microphone. And so when I can, I will ask others to do that so that it's captured for them.
Yeah, man, it's a beautiful piece of work, and I've been enjoying them coming up in my podcast app, Spotify, and sometimes I get to the end of something I'm listening to, and up comes Wills, and it's like, oh, what have we got going on now? And thankfully being you're on many platforms, I see it already, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's that one. That's great. Yeah, it's really cool. Thank you so much, Will. This has been a pleasure as always. Hopefully we get to see each other in person Monday week, which will be really exciting. And yeah, it's great to continue on this journey as mostly digital.
Dude,
sometimes in person, it's great.
A beautiful growing friendship. We just have one other thing to do. There's the other Ryan, and he's got the hunting thing. We have to go. I have to come with you hunting. I can't. I want to eat some meat with you, okay? And like, I'm not useful in many things when it comes to hunting, but I'm pretty strong, so you could put something on my back and I'll carry it. All right?
Yeah. We could always go one easier. Like, have you got a Mai next month?
No. They built a road through our Mai in Nguruwahia, and so now it's like there's no posse, and the world's kind of changing from duck shooting. So I'll text you offline. I need some help. We need to get some duck shooting posies. Yeah, I'm a good quacker, bro. I'm a good quacker.
Good. Well, if I do get the invite that's supposed to come, then I might have to say, oh, can I bring a +1? And I'll go. He knows how to duck shoot, so this is no rookie. He's good. No, awesome.